Hi, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And I'm really excited to have Mel Loy joining us all the way from Australia, which is amazing. So I'm glad we managed to make the timings work. Welcome to the show, Mel.
Thanks for having me, Victoria. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So Mel, I was really excited to get you on the show because you've got so much to share in the whole space of communication, particularly when thinking about organizational communication, internal communication, and employee engagement. And I'm sure there's loads that the listeners are going to learn from you today. But I wanted to start with your book, which I understand you've kind of recently launched. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It launched in March this year. So it's only been out a couple of months and it's all about change communication.
Excellent.
So I realized there was a bit of a gap in the market in terms of there's so many books out there on change management, and some of them include a bit of comms stuff, but there's nothing specific about change communication. So I felt like it needed to be written.
And I love the title, Change Isn't Hard. So why that title? I'm really curious.
Oh, I hear it all the time. Change is hard, change is hard. It becomes kind of an excuse for why things don't get done or why things take so long. And the thing is, change actually in and of itself isn't hard. You know, we change things all the time. So we change the products that we use. Sometimes we make big changes in our life, like buying a new car or getting married or having a child, whatever. What makes it hard is people, and people not putting the time into people and focusing on deliverables rather than the people's experience at the core of it. And so to me, it's about saying, look, change isn't hard if you put people at the center of what you do.
And why do you think people are not doing that today then? Like, why is that not happening automatically? Because it seems obvious when you say it, almost like that. Although I'm sorry, without sort of doing down what you're doing, but it's like people, like, sure, okay, but
Yeah.
why isn't it happening in organizations though?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I think part of it is the pace and rate of change and the size and scope of change that we are experiencing now has never been experienced before. It will never be this quiet again. It just keeps getting busier and busier. And so because organizations are going through so much change, often concurrently, they're just not putting the time into thinking it through. They're just trying to get this stuff rolled out. They're trying to get the new technology, the restructure, the new strategy, whatever it is, they're just trying to get it done. And so they focus on deliverables. As I said, they're not focused on people because they have deliverables they've committed to. But I think the other issue is that until very recently, communication was kind of brought in either last and, they're like, I'll just rub a bit of comms on it and the change will be fine. Or it wasn't seen as a specialist area, change communication. So it was handed over to internal comms. And that's quite a different kettle of fish to a change communication specialist. And so I think that particular piece of the puzzle is still evolving. There's a lot of comms people who don't realize that they're two different things either. And yes, there's crossover, but they are two different specializations. So I think that's part of it as well.
Okay, so let's say there are people listening today who are leaders in their organization, or they're leaders in their teams, and they're facing this right now. They're having that challenge of the pain of going through change, and they want to make sure it lands. They want to make sure that people are engaging with this. Are there some, I mean, I appreciate it does depend a little bit on what kind of change we're talking about, but are there some broad principles, some ideas that can really help people think about this?
Absolutely. So, as I said, putting people at the center of the experience. So, understanding people and how they communicate is one of the first steps. Some people really need that one-on-one conversation. Others are quite happy to get a visual or have a video or something that explains it to them. So, understanding different personality types and styles is quite critical. And I do have a quiz that you can do around that. It's a bit of fun. It's not overly scientific by any means, but it does break that down. And when we're talking about team leaders communicating, it really is up to them to individualize, personalize, and contextualize the change for their team members. They should know their team well enough to be able to do that. At a broad level, when we're talking about massive organizations, that's impossible to do. Obviously, you can't tailor each piece of communication for the thousands of individuals. I like to work by the rule of three. So repackage the same message 3 times in 3 different ways to try and meet as many of those needs as possible. So that's the core of it. And then I also have what I call the 3 T's of trust. So they are the 3 principles you can apply to any communication, whether it's change, crisis, internal, whatever it might be. And they are thoughtful, timely, and transparent. So thoughtful is about tailoring, but it's also about empathy. It's about understanding that, you know, people have feelings, and we're not talking to robots. We're talking to human beings who, at the end of the day, squishy balls of emotions. We need to think about their experiences and the context that they bring into this. So if they've been through a lot of change recently, for example, and they're really change fatigued, and you're asking them to do one more thing, that's a lot. That's overwhelming. So thoughtful communication thinks about that and acknowledges that and talks about support options. The other T's are timely. So a lot of the time I hear this from clients or just people in business over the last 20 years, we need to raise awareness of this project. It's like, well, you're raising awareness while everybody else is raising awareness. It's just white noise. When there's nothing that people have to do yet, probably don't need to raise that much awareness yet, except for with key stakeholders. Conversely, leaving it too late, where people go, oh, I wish I'd known that 2 weeks ago because I wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z otherwise. So timely is really important. And then there's transparent, obviously within boundaries, especially when we're talking about things like restructures and redeployments. But transparency, being open, honest, genuine, acknowledging when you don't have all the answers, but committing to finding out. That's so important. So those 3, timely, transparent, and thoughtful, even if you are very poorly resourced in terms of your comms and change, if you just think about those 3 and coach your leaders to think about those 3, you're already on the right path.
I love that. And I think that's really interesting because obviously timely, I can imagine sometimes people get lost in like what is timely compared to everything else. But being thoughtful, I love that, particularly as you say, because there's so much change happening at the moment, and giving support to people, and then transparency. And when you talk about transparency, is this where kind of vulnerability comes in a little bit as well? So I'm curious, where
Absolutely.
does that overlap happen?
Yeah. And look, I'm a Brené Brown fangirl, so she talks a fair bit about vulnerability and those sorts of things.
Mm.
But there is a piece there, particularly when you have a leader who's kind of in the trenches and going through this with their team, to be able to show that, you know, they're feeling feelings as well. Now, there again, it's vulnerability with boundaries. You don't want to be going in and going, this whole thing's awful and I hate it and I hate being here too. Like we're all in terrible trouble. That doesn't help anyone. But vulnerability can just be showing up with some empathy and acknowledging emotion, saying, yeah, look, I'm a bit uncertain too, but this is what I'm going to do. And this is how I'm going to find out. And this is what I need from you. So that vulnerability piece, yes, within boundaries, but it is about connection. It's about connection with the fellow humans that you work with. And that creates a safer space for them to be able to navigate the uncertainty as well. And I always say that uncertainty breeds fear and fear breeds poor behavior. So if we can use these principles to help allay some of that uncertainty, we can help keep people motivated and working for as long as we can as we go through some of these changes.
Mm. And I'm really curious, like there must be, times when you see mistakes happen. And of course, well, we're human, mistakes happen. But what are the sort of most common mistakes that people make when it comes to this area?
Yeah, so I think one of them I've already touched on is around assuming there's a one size fits all approach. So I've sent out this email, tick, I'm done. Everybody should get it. Why aren't they doing what I'm asking them to do? So again, we need to tailor not just how we communicate, but the messaging that we use and what we focus on in those messages as well, who delivers them. All those pieces come together to make something meaningful for somebody as well. I think the other thing is not preparing leaders enough for communication, because your team leader, your direct leader, is your most trusted voice. All the international research shows that. So a message that's sent from the CEO isn't going to have as much of an impact as a message that's sent from your direct leader, because you're more likely to trust them. But the challenge is we put people into leadership positions and go, off you go, lead now, with no help to understand, okay, well, what does leadership communication during change actually mean? What do I need to do? How do I do that? So again, not preparing leaders enough and giving them the tools and the support and building their confidence before the change happens is a big no-no, because they are your most trusted channel, and you will be leaning on them as change champions and change influencers as you go through this process to communicate. So they're probably the two big things: not tailoring or personalizing, and not preparing leaders to be able to communicate effectively.
So if there are leaders listening to this, they should also be perhaps connecting with their internal communication, their change communication kind of colleagues, and saying, right, this is what I need. I need the tools, the support, the messaging. I need to feel confident.
Absolutely.
I can go out there and talk about this. I can send messages on this. Okay, great. And let's say, things have already started, like communication is starting to go out, it's not landing. Do you sort of have some suggestions when things are starting to go wrong, when there are problems and the change just isn't being accepted, or maybe even resisted within the organization?
Yeah, well, the big question is to ask why. So, you can't fix something if you don't know what needs to be fixed. So this is where, again, we don't want to wait until the end of the change to then get feedback from people. We want to be checking and correcting throughout the entire communication cycle. So this means having those little litmus tests along the way, checking with leaders, getting anecdotal feedback, finding out where there is resistance, and then asking the question, okay, so why? And because sometimes it's just as simple as, well, this one word in this one sentence in this one email that went out made people confused. And so, oh, okay, we'll fix that. We'll fix that next time. Other times it's because things haven't been explained clearly. There's complex information that hasn't been simplified, for example. But you will find that you will always get people who have higher levels of reactance than others. And reactance is a psychological phenomenon where we basically just say no when we're told to do something. We all do it, but to different levels. And some people have much higher reactance. And so this is where you need to really take more of a one-on-one approach with some individuals. And one of the tips I suggest is what we call challenging their illusion of explanatory depth. So we all have
that
this.
Sounds interesting. What's that?
I know.
Right.
So it's again, it's leaning on behavioral science a bit here, but we all have this idea that we think we know more than we actually do. So you could ask somebody, tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident you are that you know how a lawnmower works. Like, oh yeah, I'm a 10. And then you go, okay, talk me through the process of how it works. And this is where it all starts to fall apart. And they might go, well, actually, I'm probably more of a 3. I don't actually know how the motor mower works. And this is where, in a change context, you can actually challenge people's illusion of explanatory depth. Normally, they've made a decision very quickly that they just don't like this change. They don't want to engage to it. And this is why. So let's say, for example, you're changing a travel policy. You might ask them, okay, well, can you show me exactly in the policy where you think you're worse off than you were before? And if they can't point to that, well, that's your opportunity to kind of challenge their understanding. Now, it may not change their minds overnight, but it will at least plant a bit of a seed that they might back off a little bit and start to think a little bit more broadly with less reactance about what's happening. So there's lots of little things you can do at an individual level. But again, those conversations aren't just about trying to change people's minds. They're about trying to understand why they think that in the first place, because that could be a reflection on your communication and something you need to change. So they're a good opportunity.
I love that, because actually sometimes in these situations it ends up being a bit like them and us, like I need to tell you, and I need to influence you, and I need you to believe this because I need you to do this. But in reality, I think your question, which is very sort of insightful, is why? Like, why are they thinking like this? Not trying to set it up as I need you to kind of accept it.
Yeah, it's curiosity.
Really great point. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And actually that's true for, I think when I think about it, like a lot of communication, right? Like we need to be curious. We need to know like what's going on, right? And understand what's driving.
And I think part of that too is the curse of knowledge. When you are in a project and you've been in it so long, you forget that other people outside of your project bubble have nowhere near the depth of knowledge or context that you have. And so a lot of the time, communication coming out of those projects reflects that. There's a lot of assumed knowledge. And so again, asking the why can help you go back and go, okay, well, this is, potentially because we didn't explain things well enough, or we assumed a lot of knowledge that people don't have.
I love that. And I'm really aware that right now, in this current moment in time, there's a lot of change going on at the moment in organizations around Europe, particularly around restructure, reorgs. even redundancies. I mean, that is a very common theme, and I assume it may be similar in Australia as well right now. So I'm really curious, are there any particular nuances thinking about that type of change that leaders need to be really thinking about? I'm sure, there is a lot of communication that comes out, but again, what works well? What are you seeing that are common mistakes, particularly to do with this?
I think one of the challenges with restructures is, particularly in Australia under industrial relations laws, there's only so much you can say in certain ways at certain times to people, depending on the impact. So there's that whole HR piece that does kind of, it can be a little bit of a roadblock to that open and transparent communication because of how you need to term things and when you can have a conversation with somebody about the impact on them. So that is a challenge. But again, it comes back to, are you being thoughtful? Are you being timely? And are you being transparent within boundaries? So it's not like you're going to go into a meeting and go, oh, James, you're being made redundant tomorrow, just so you know, because obviously that's not going to fly. Yes, it's transparent and it's timely, but it is not thoughtful. So it comes back to understanding what are the change impacts. And then the greater the impact, the more personalized approach. So if a person is being made redundant, obviously that's not going to fly with an email. That's a conversation with somebody in person in a thoughtful way. And it is allowing them the space and the time to have their feelings heard. A lot of the time, people just want to feel heard and have their feelings validated. And in that situation, that is absolutely okay, right? So I think it really has to be very tailored, very individually. At a broader level, rumors get around very quickly. I've been in organizations where we've known the restructures have been coming long before there was any official announcement. And like I said before, all that does is create this environment of uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, you lose people, you lose good talent. They just go, you know what, I'm not hanging around to find out. I'll just find a new job now because I can't afford not to have a job. So they leave. Or you just get people who have just become very disengaged. And so productivity and performance go down hugely. And then the way people respond to uncertainty, as I said, is often fear. And fear breeds really interesting reactions from people. So at the broader level, I always recommend, look, just get on top of it and just say, we are having to look at a restructure. This is why. I know we don't have all the information right now. This is what I need from you. This is what we're going to give. Hang tight. We're committed to this timeline. This is when we're going to tell you what we're going to tell you, and these sorts of things as well. But also, is there an opportunity for those people who are impacted or who may be impacted to be involved in creating the solution? Because then at least there's a sense of ownership and co-creation that they've been listened to and actually consulted with, not just the tick box, yes, we had a conversation, but actually, if you have to go through a restructure or a reorganization, why not get your people involved and get their ideas rather than it just being the mothership coming down and telling you how you should be organized? Get the ideas from the bottom up, and then it becomes something that is, as I said, co-ownership is really powerful, and it can really help with people navigating the situation. Even if they end up being made redundant, at least they know their voices were heard.
I love that. And I think that's really interesting because I know myself, having been in reorg situations, how quickly the rumors fly, how quickly the fear breeds, and it just cuts off anything that's really going on, like literally for months on end. People are living in a state of, I'm job searching, I'm uncertain, I'm just not interested anymore.
And it's all they can talk about.
It's all they can talk about. And it's like it becomes a self-perpetuating like spiral downwards. But I also really like the idea of co-creation. And that is really, really interesting because I think that is something that doesn't often happen, right? Like it's often like top down, like we're going to tell you how it is. And I know very interestingly from speaking to people recently, actually, sometimes people are in situations where they're like, actually, I'd happily put my hands up for redundancy, but I know that person over there really doesn't want it. So can we talk, could I volunteer? And I know in that specific situation, she wasn't allowed to volunteer. So it was kind of quite interesting. I like that interesting idea of co-creation. Have you seen organizations do that well, do you think?
Very few.
Okay, I was about to say.
There are organizations like some of the bigger ones. So Google, they do this very well in terms of they have quite a flat hierarchy structure. They really do source ideas from their people and get them to co-create. I think we saw a lot more of it during the COVID years when companies had to stand people down and those sorts of things. A lot of smaller businesses, their people actually put their hand up and said, well, what if we all went part-time instead of full-time and wrote it out? That way we're still employed, we're still getting some income. And that on the other side of this, we're still here. So there were situations like that where, again, calling on the people in the business and saying, right, here's the problem we've got. Let's hear what your ideas are. Well, how can we help solve this? I've been in organizations like yourself where, big corporates, and they've brought in external consultants at millions of dollars and said, okay, they're going to be doing a examination of all the business units and then going to come back to us and say, this is what you should do. And I'm not saying those people don't have their place, but they don't understand what it's like to work on the front line or on the ground in those organizations. And, that, again, it just breeds a lot of resentment that you're not being asked. And when we hear it a lot, there'll be consultation, as I said before. So often that's just a tick box exercise. It's not a two-way communication. So I think there is so much scope there to do that so differently and so much better.
I love that. Now I'm going to move into a slightly different sort of topic now. And this is kind of what does the future look like for change communication, internal communication? Like, where do you see it kind of going? Obviously, technology, AI will play a role, but what are the things you see coming up that's going to impact how leaders can be engaging, how employees are being engaged? I'm really curious with this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big trend that you touched on just then was AI. It is everywhere. Every conference I go to, every workshop I go to, it's all about AI and the intersection with what we already do. A lot of comms people write for a living, and now you've got these tools coming along. But for me, there's sort of two sides to that coin. There's the productivity piece, which can really be so helpful from an AI perspective, but also creativity piece as well. There's a lot of tools that help with that. So I think that's going to become more and more part of the role of internal comms and change comms is how you use those tools to help you with your work. They don't have common sense. They can't do strategy, but they can give you starting points. So that's one big trend, obviously, is AI, and that's just going to keep evolving. It's never going to be this dumb again. It gets smarter by the day. I think the other piece is, as I touched on before, this hybrid environment that we're in now. When we went into COVID, a lot of companies had just put on Band-Aid solutions. They're like, oh, we're going to need to have Teams now. And they'd never had Microsoft Teams before. And, a project that normally would have taken 6 to 12 months was suddenly done in 2 days, which goes to show how quickly things can be done if you've got the sense of urgency. But a lot of Band-Aid fixes. And now companies are kind of stepping back and going, hang on, we have so many internal comms channels and we don't know what's what. So what do we use for collaboration? What do we use for knowledge management? What do we use for internal comms? And trying to pull back and reorganize all your channels and communication systems. I'm seeing a lot of that happening. And I think the other piece to that is this hybrid situation we are in. And there is this thing called the proximity bias, where they're finding that people are more likely to be promoted and get good work and those sorts of things if they're more visible, if they're in proximity to their leaders, even if they're not performing as well as the people who aren't in front of their leaders all the time. So from a hybrid comms perspective, leaders now have to be much more aware of those biases that are coming in, but also find ways that they can build connection, even if somebody is on the other side of the planet or, is only coming in 1 or 2 days a week. So that, I think, is going to keep evolving because that is the way of the world now. So there is a big piece there around just general internal comms in a hybrid world. But change comms is another level of complexity. How do you make sure everybody in your team gets the same message about the change at the same time when they're in 5 different locations and some are in the office and some aren't? So that is a challenge that is still being worked through as well.
I think that's so important, that proximity bias. And I'm sort of curious because, sometimes one of the things that I hear is, well, it's really challenging to build good connection with people that I'm just not meeting anymore, or I never actually have met at all, actually, because they've started in the last few years. They work at, as you say, different end of the country or other side of the planet. and they're, you know what, we just don't get to meet up. So have you got any advice, like, you know, for leaders who are like, well, how do I build these connections? Like, we're all hopping on calls all the time, but we're not really getting to know each other. We're not really having the time to kind of, I don't know, the water cooler chat, or, you know,
Yeah.
understand really like what's going on in that person's life. So what sort of advice do you give to people who really are struggling with that right now?
Yeah, look, it's a hard one to navigate. I think a couple of things. Number one, if you can, get your team together in person at least once a year and make sure there's nothing else going on, that they can actually down tools for those 1 or 2 days and actually get to know each other and spend time together and plan together and do those things. There is nothing like face to face. We know that. So at least once a year, get them together. Otherwise, there's other things you can do as a leader. So having, open door time, I call it, which would have worked in an office, you'd have an open door, but virtual open door time. So you block out time in your diary and go, anybody can book a meeting with me, or just drop in on a Zoom call. Have a Zoom call open all day or all through those hours. If you join in, great, that's where I'll be. So having those opportunities where I don't have to book a meeting, it's not formal. I can just, duck my head in the virtual door and have a chat and check in. And I think more and more importantly are those one-on-ones, and whether that's virtual or in person. I know there were times when I've worked in teams where your one-on-ones drop off because you're just so busy and like, oh, we'll reschedule, we'll rain check it. You can't afford to do that anymore. So have your one-on-ones, stick to them, and have those conversations. And so really it's more about get away from the written comms, get away from the asynchronous communication, get into the synchronous communication, the time when you spend together and have two-way conversation.
Yeah, I really like that. And actually, it is so easy, right, to ping messages or just drop an
Mm,
email. But it's like switching up the channel, isn't it? It's like
yeah,
making sure there is actually proper FaceTime there. I think that's really, really great suggestions. And I really like your idea of the open Zoom room or the open Teams room where people can just literally pop by and say hi. And yeah, like
yeah,
as you would do, like in the office space, like you would have gone
that's
past
it.
somebody's desk and go, hey, how's it going? Happy Friday, on
Yeah,
all of
you don't have
this.
to overcook it. I think that's the
Yeah.
other thing too. There's a lot of shiny technology and things out there, but you can keep it simple.
Mm.
And when you keep it simple, more people are more likely to use it too.
Yeah. I mean, interesting enough, we had, I think you know her, Lisa Partridge. I think it's actually how
Yes.
we first met
Oh,
on the
yes.
show a couple of episodes
Love
ago.
Lisa.
Love Lisa. And anyway, she was talking about the power of walking. And
Mm.
obviously, this is only true for people who are in the same location or maybe able to get to the same location every so often. But that power of just getting out of the office. I often say this,
Mm.
like, you know, design time away from your desk, sitting opposite each other, or just looking at each other on the Zoom room or in the Teams room.
Yeah.
Get out and outside. You know, if it's nice enough, it's not raining in London for once today. You know, we're having this rainy summer, but it's crazy. But you know, get out on the road, like walk together, talk, you know, connect, like have a real conversation rather than just
Yeah.
another action to-do list conversation, right?
And that actually raises another idea, is that, yes, you can even do that when you're not in the same room.
Yeah.
Grab your phone, put it on FaceTime, stick some earbuds in, and both of you go for a walk. And even though you're in different parts of the world or wherever, you're both outside and you're not in front of a computer where you're tempted to look at your emails and check your messages at the same time that you're having this Teams call or Zoom call as well. So get away
Yeah.
from and really tune into people.
I love that. Yeah. The virtual walk and talk. I love it.
Yes.
Excellent. Really, really great. Great. Well, this is so helpful. I mean, I loving this conversation. I love the insights you're bringing, Mel. And I think there's been some amazing, useful tips that you're bringing here today and strategies that I know our listeners are going to absolutely take away and be making loads of notes on. But we're coming towards the end of the episode. So I'm really curious, you know, what's something you've been learning about communication recently or have learned about communication recently?
Yeah, well, I am a part of the International Association of Business Communicators, so IABC. So there's chapters all over the world. And we actually just had an event this week on virtual reality and augmented reality and how you can use that in communication. There's companies already using it, like mining companies using it for training, for example. But I find that whole side of things from a channels perspective even so fascinating, and how powerful to be able to explain to people, well, this is what your new office building is going to look like. put on a set of goggles and experience it for yourself. And, to be able to use that in some ways for change communication, that's fascinating me right now. I'm also doing my postgrad in behavioral science. So I am up to my eyeballs in effects and biases and stuff right now. But again, for me, it's the crossover with change communication that I find really fascinating, that I'm exploring in a lot more detail.
Amazing. I love that. Well, it sounds like it would be loads more that you'll be able to bring into the podcast, into your training, into your coaching. Wow, what a fascinating area to be studying. Good luck with that. I hope it goes well.
Thank you. Yeah, so do I.
So Mel, if people want to find out a bit more about your training that you do, the consultancy work that you do in this space, like where are the best places for people to find out more about what you do?
Yeah, great question. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find, just Mel Loy. So look for me there. And I post there, like yourself, very regularly, lots of tips and tricks and all sorts of things. heymelcoms.com.au is my website. And I'm also on Instagram at heymel.coms. And again, post lots of things on there and videos as well. But honestly, just reach out, send me a message, send me an email. I'm happy to have a chat.
And of course, you have a podcast too, right?
Yes. I probably should mention that. Yes, it's called Less Chatter, More Matter, and it's all about communications. And obviously, you'll be a guest on it too, Victoria.
Thank you.
So it's a mixture of me just doing solo episodes where I share really practical communication tips, and interviewing other comms people, and sometimes not even comms people, but people who can bring a different perspective to communication as well. So it's a lot of fun to do.
And it's a brilliant podcast. I mean, I've loved listening to the episodes, and there's lots
Thank
of
you.
amazing content there. So definitely worthwhile a listen. Well, Mel, listen, thank you so much for joining us today, particularly because it's late in your Friday. You're already almost in the weekend, where we're still here on Friday morning recording today. But thank you so much for being here. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. See you next time, everyone. Bye.